Hi, my name is Leslie, and with me is Janice. As one of the leading technology companies in the world, HP is where big ideas are built and thrive. And we're proud to be ranked by Forbes amongst the top 10 companies with the happiest young professionals. HP is a key partner with NACME, the National Action Council for Minorities in Engineering. We were asked to provide advice for interns gearing up to interview with companies like HP. Janice, let's go to the cafe and let's have a quick chat.
Okay. So we're here in the cafe and I'm with Janice, and Janice, I have to ask you, as VP of the Enterprise Group, I know that you do a lot of recruiting. I know that you do a lot of mentoring of students in the STEM career fields. And I know the question always comes up, so what does it take to get into a company like HP? What's the whole interview process about?
Okay, so at HP we like to hire the very best, and we also like to hire students that are innovators, creative thinkers, and those that really want to work in a culturally inclusive environment. In terms of what's the interview process like? Well, the interview really serves the purpose of being an assessment tool for employers to really learn about you as a student, to understand your technical capabilities, your potential, your leadership skills, how you communicate, and how you'd fit into the company.
Well, and I know that there's the one question that's inevitable in every interview, and that's the question of, so tell me about yourself. It's a pretty open-ended question. So what are employers looking for when they ask that?
Well, it's really an icebreaker question. So it's the opportunity to start the conversation, start a comfortable dialogue, allow you to talk about yourself a little bit, which usually eases a student's nerves. And then it begins the opportunity for an employer to start assessing the way you communicate.
Oh, good. That's good to know. And then another question that I have is, so how do you best prepare and really engage yourself in the interview process?
Well, I've asked a couple of recent intern hires that I made to join us today. So I'd like to invite Tejesh to come and share some perspectives.
Hi, Janice.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thank you.
So one of the things I thought you could share with us in terms of interview preparation is, how do you mentally prepare for an interview? What kinds of things did you do, and what kind of advice would you have?
Well, when you actually get called for an interview, you're pretty nervous, and I mean, you prepared for it so much, and everything depends on that one final interview. So you're under a lot of pressure to perform very well and impress the other person. Instead, if you try to look at it as an experience, you're more relaxed, you're more motivated, confident, and the most important thing of all, you're not afraid to fail. And I think that's one of the most important things you need to keep in mind, to go through it like an experience rather than a performance.
So that's great. So what I'd like to ask next is, so how much time do you put into preparing for an interview?
Well, the most important thing is a good night's sleep, and eat well before you go for an interview, because you want your voice to hold up. And you need a good night's sleep because you don't want to doze off or look drowsy or not be able to communicate because you haven't had any sleep. So be fresh, be relaxed, and be more confident. So that way, just feel good about yourself when you go into an interview.
Sure, and have clarity of thought, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Thanks. Great suggestions, Tejesh.
Well, Janice, what other suggestions do you have in preparation?
Well, quite a few thoughts here for continuing your preparation. I think, first of all, I would say you really need to research the company that you're interviewing with. So know their capabilities, know where they're located, know what kinds of jobs they're hiring for, and what they're in the news for recently as well. The second thing I'd recommend is bring some questions. So think in advance about things you want to know about the company, because after all, you are also assessing the company about, is this the kind of thing I want to do? Is this the type of company I want to work for? And ask about your job duties in the position, who you'd be working for and what they're like, what kinds of products you'd be creating and developing. My other suggestion is to make sure you engage in the interview. I think Tejesh shared a little bit about that, but it's really important that you come across energetic, an equal participant in the conversation and the interview, and have a good back and forth dialogue. The next thing I would say is prepare a few responses to questions that you're anticipating. So you've thought through those in advance, you're able to articulate a few key points that you want to get across in an interview. If you wait to hear those questions for the first time and think of your answer on the fly, you may not bring forward the answer that you really wished you would have. So prepare that. I think the other thing is to make sure you don't sound rehearsed. So be authentic, be sincere, be genuine, be relaxed, and it really helps an employer or the interviewer get to know what you're like as a person and what you'd be like working on a day-to-day basis. The other suggestion that I have would be to think of some examples of experiences that you can share. Many employers are now using a technique called behavioral interviewing, which asks you to be very detailed in your response to a question. So an employer might ask you to share an example of what your strength might be, and then they might ask you to kind of drill into an example perhaps of where you've utilized your strength. They may even ask you questions like, what are your development areas, what are your weaknesses, and what are you interested in and why. And if you have some examples where you can express where you've demonstrated your interest, where you've worked on things you're interested in, and utilized your strengths or discovered your development areas, those all make you a more credible interviewee.
Question for you on that. Can you bring in, so for example, a lot of students have great volunteer experience. Is that something they can apply to a question in showing their leadership skills?
Absolutely. I think, especially when you're interviewing for an internship, not all students have real work experience initially. And so having an example of a role you've played, whether it's paid or unpaid or volunteer or not, helps you illustrate how you interact with people, the kinds of leadership you've exhibited, the techniques or skills that you've had to employ in that volunteer role. So it's a great opportunity to bring forward in an interview. I think I'd also suggest that you think about how you're going to differentiate yourself. So what I mean by that is, when an interviewer is perhaps interviewing many students back to back all day long, what's going to make you stand out as an interview candidate? So think about an example, your energy, your interest level, your preparation. Think about, yes, you want to fit in, but think also about what makes you shine and be sure to show that. To that point, I'd also remind everybody to keep the tone of the interview positive. I'm sure you'll have potentially some examples of negative encounters you've had, but never in the course of an interview criticize a former manager or talk negatively about an experience. Rather, focus on what you learned, how you learned it, and the growth and the positive that came out of an experience that maybe wasn't the best. And those are very telling to a prospective manager.
Those are all great suggestions, really great suggestions. Can I just ask a little question and kind of probe a little bit more?
Sure.
So on the negative questions, do you think it's okay to if you can turn that negative into a positive if that experience changed for you?
I think that's very important. You don't want to leave a negative experience feeling sour and carrying that with you. Employers know that in your course of a position, you're going to have ups and downs. You're going to have opportunities where you learn, where a project didn't go the way you wanted it to go. And what's going to be important is your ability to bounce back, your ability to learn and grow from that. And showing that you're able to do that and keep a positive outlook is really attractive to a hiring manager.
Right, good. So do you have any other preparations, suggestions that you would like to add?
Yeah, I have two others. One is, remember that past performance is a strong indicator of future potential. So it is important to bring good examples of your experiences. The second suggestion I have is know who you're interviewing with. Take a few minutes to know their name, Google them, look in LinkedIn at their profile, ask somebody who previously interviewed with them, ask your recruiter, and try to get an understanding of who this person is and what they do and what their role is with their company.
Good. Well, so speaking of companies, and I think about HP as a high-tech company, what does HP look for specifically when you think about in the engineering fields?
Well, Given that an intern student is not very experienced yet, there's a set of kind of general attributes that we look for. Certainly one is how well you communicate. Another would be basic leadership skills. How you think, how you approach problem solving, and your energy, passion, and enthusiasm about technology and solving technical problems, as well as your ability to collaborate and work in a team.
And speaking of technical questions, Janice, I hear there are a lot of tech companies that ask really detailed questions of interns. So how would you suggest they approach those types of questions?
Well, that's exactly right, because after all, tech companies or technical positions have to hire very technical people, and part of the interview process is to assess that skill. So I've actually invited another intern we recently hired, and I wanted to invite Art to come and join us and share his thoughts and advice on how to address
how
that.
Are you?
Good, how are you?
Hi, good to see you.
Thanks for joining us.
So Art, when you've faced an interview question that's really deeply technical, what are your suggestions for how to approach it?
Well, there's some questions that might not have the right answer, or you just don't know the answer. And there's a ton of research books about it, but my advice is just stay relaxed, try to answer to the best of your ability so the interviewer could see how you think and how you approach the problem.
That's a good point. And the other thing to note is that from an employer's perspective, oftentimes we're looking to understand your approach to solving that problem, how you respond to the pressure of perhaps being posed a question that there's no right answer to, and also looking at how you frame up the problem and how you respond back to the employer in that kind of situation. Great suggestions, Art. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so I know that HP values the power of their people in a diverse workplace. So how would you advise minorities to communicate what additional benefits they bring to the table in an interview process?
Right. So my key advice on this is don't underestimate the value that your diversity brings to a company. You will have different life experiences, different perspectives, and differences that are going to be really important to help a company innovate, to help a company address customer segments that include minority segments as well. So be sure to highlight the unique characteristics that you have and the attributes in your beliefs, because that is going to be very attractive to an employer.
Right. That's very, very good point. Okay, so what should I try to get out of the interview?
It's really important because you're also assessing that company and that employer. It's really important that you understand who you're going to work for, what you're going to be doing, where you'll be located, what the company stands for, and really the basics of why that position is important to the business. It will also serve to help you create a sense of, does this position fit my interest? Does this position fulfill my career goals long term? So those are the important things to think about.
Okay, and now this is the question that is always asked. When you think about the fun startups, when you think about the nonprofits, and when you think about those great internet companies out there, what are the benefits for working with a big company like HP?
Well, you have to think about short-term and long-term experiences. A company of HP size, for example, really gives you the opportunity to explore many different types of roles, positions, businesses, segments, and customers. Potentially you'd have the opportunity to work in what feels like different companies, but in fact is one company. It allows you to get cross-training. It allows you to work with people from around the world, allows you to work in different geographies, and to actually get exposed to a real broad array of experiences and products. So it's a great way to feel like you've worked for many different companies, but yet know you're working in a company culture that you've selected with a lot of people that you want to work with.
Yeah, so it's important for you to really weigh, kind of what you want.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Janice, thank you for your time and really good insights. I know that prospective interns will find some really good nuggets in the information you shared.
You're welcome.
With over 300,000 employees globally and doing business in over 270 countries and regions, HP is committed to building a robust pipeline to identify, employ, develop, and retain the very best people the world has to offer.
And thanks to NACME, because it's through our partnership that we can help shape an American STEM workforce where diversity and innovation drives global competitiveness. Thank you.
you.